we can't just point the finger at parents all the time. I think we're going to keep seeing this. Yo, Savage Psychotherapist here again, and the topic of this video is growing numbers of children, adolescents, young adult people with mental health problems in America and in Western culture. This is something that we all look around and intuitively see. And we can talk about theories of why that might be. We can talk about smartphones and the work by Jonathan Haidt and others that highlights rises in anxiety and depression and suicide and emergency room suicide behaviors and self-harm behaviors since kind of like the 2010s timeframe, whenever smartphones became widely prevalent. This is all hindsight bias stuff too at this point, right? So pointing the finger, it's a little late in the game. Now, if you don't know that you should prevent your young children and young teenage children from free access to things like Discord and Roblox and all those kind of things in the internet and have their own little smartphones and things like that. If you're still doing that now, you're kind of behind the power curve as a parent, but hindsight bias is 2020 when it comes to this stuff. The fact remains is that for the last 1 or 2 or 3 decades, there have been so many efforts to increase awareness of mental health issues, improve mental health literacy, reduce stigma. There's more mental health resources and therapists and online virtual tools and platforms and information available to people now than there ever has been before. And mental health problems amongst the youth and children and adolescents and young adults is not getting any better. And there's probably some data that support that. And we can talk about record keeping and data collection being superior now, or reporting being better now than it used to be. We can talk about those things, and I'm sure there's some validity to some of that stuff, but the idea is that it's not getting any better despite an increase in resources, literacy, awareness, and reduction in stigma efforts. It doesn't seem like it's getting any better. And in fact, it might even be getting worse. So Lucy Folks and John Andrews out of the UK talk about this and their prevalence inflation hypothesis. Check those sources for yourself, Lucy Folks and Jonathan Haidt, and some of the work that they've done. This is not a revelation in any way, right? What I'm going to add to that is intuitively, I believe, this is my opinion, right? All of these things are always just my opinion, is that we're going to see growing numbers of children, adolescents, and young adults with mental health problems in American and Western culture, despite coming from stable homes. I'm not talking about perfect homes. I'm not talking about ideal homes. I'm not talking about white picket fence American dream homes. I'm talking about stable homes. 2-parent households where at least one of them is emotionally and behaviorally stable. Homes that are absent any abuse or neglect. A stable environment for kids to kind of go home to and find refuge in. I think despite that, we're going to continue to see more and more kids that are maladapted and that grow into young adults who are maladapted and have mental health problems. The reason that I'm bringing that up is because there's been a trope in the mental health and therapy and psychology and human development fields for a long time that goes along the lines of, if you see an adult person with mental health problems, relationship problems, their parents must have messed them up. The big point of this video is I'm going to kind of call a little bit of BS on that idea. I don't think it's just as simple as that, and I don't think that that's the automatic assumption that should be made whenever we're looking at somebody with personality disorder issues, it's really significant interpersonal relationship issues, things like that. I think there's more to it than that, and it's not just as simple as pointing the finger at the parent and saying, you messed up your kid. And I come to this conclusion due to my own personal experiences, due to some professional experiences, and due to conversations that I've had with colleagues, mental health colleagues who scratch their heads and they have children in their late teens and early to mid 20s, and they'll attend seminars and they'll they'll go, oh, I thought it was me. Like, I thought I messed something up. I thought I failed as a parent. And because their kids are having problems, their kids are having emotional problems, behavioral problems, problems with relationships, problems adapting and adjusting to the world in a healthy way. And they're putting a lot of guilt and blame on their shoulders. And I don't know that it belongs there, right? I don't know that it belongs there solely. So one of the things that I kind of want to know is, of all the self-proclaimed child development experts and parenting experts that are out there in the landscape who were raising kids in the 90s, raising kids in the late 80s, raising kids into the 2000s, raising kids into the 2010s, how many of you self-proclaimed gurus and parenting experts and social media experts and therapy experts have young people that you've raised, that you've parented, that are perfectly adjusted without any kind of mental health issues? How many of you have that going on? And I think it's going to be less than what you might expect. And that lets us know that maybe that trope isn't quite as accurate as we've always thought. And it's because we don't know sometimes. We're trying to pin the tail on the donkey. And so the easy answer has always been, oh, that person's parents must have sucked. And to add to that, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think biology, genetics, and heredity have more of an influence in the manifestation of mental health problems in young people, children, adults, young adults, adolescents, than what we typically traditionally have thought, right? Because sometimes we'll look at a personality disorder and we'll say something must have happened developmentally with that person. And when you try to go through and find the boxes to check, maybe the only thing that even makes any sense to you when you look back at the situation is there's a genetic influence there that had to have been very, very powerful. Something that ran in the family, some vulnerability. So I think that's more powerful than what we often give it credit for. We talk about the nurture aspect of things and the experiential aspect of things a lot, and those things obviously are very influential. But I think that genetic influence might be a little bit more powerful than what we give it credit for when it comes to how these things turn out. And who can control for that? You can do everything right as a parent. You can provide the most stable environment. You can go above and beyond, and you still might have children who grow up to have mental health problems and be very maladapted. I just kind of want to go out on a limb and say, I think we're going to see that continue. And I don't think that what we should do is automatically assume that there was poor parenting. I think that makes it even more important to check biases, to check assumptions as clinicians, to collect thorough, objective information, but not just jump to the conclusion, right? Because people can not like their parents too. Adult people that have mental health problems can look back and say that they didn't like their parents or they didn't agree with the way that their parents raised them. But that doesn't explain the manifestation and development of mental health pathology in and of itself. I didn't like my parents. They weren't nice enough. I didn't feel like my dad was emotionally available. There's degrees that come along with this, right? I think it's wrong to just immediately jump to that conclusion. And I think we're going to see more, we're going to see more and more of that. Despite people coming from stable homes. Internet influence, social media influence, TikTok, Discord, there are all these cesspools out there where kids can get affected dramatically by things. We can't just point the finger at parents all the time. I think we're going to keep seeing this. That's my idea for today. Savage Psychotherapist, out.